In the last movie, we started our discussion of access modifiers, but the last example we were looking at led me to something that I want to dive a little bit deeper in. If you'll remember back, even though we didn't have access to the private and the protected methods inside the class, we did have another method that was publicly accessible, hello, and it did have access to those private and protected methods. It's a little bit like a bank. We can't just walk into a bank and go into the bank vault and either put money in or take money out. We have to go see the teller first. The teller can go to the bank vault for us and put cash in or out, but we're restricted from going in ourselves. This type of access setup is very common in object-oriented programming, so I think it's worth looking at a little closer. And we can refer to it as setters and getters. Those are two very strange words, but what we're talking about is methods which set something and methods which get something. So setting a value and getting a value. And generally what we're talking about is working with attributes or perhaps with databases. Let's look closer at setter methods and getter methods. And to start us off on this discussion, I'm going to just paste in a simple class. I call it the setter getter example class. And you'll see that it has an attribute, a. And a by default is 1 and it's private, so we cannot access it from outside the class. We've already seen how we try to create a new instance of it and then access a like this, that it will fail for us. That won't work. It is restricted. However, we can have a getter method, which I've called get_a, and it's public, and we have access to it. And it has access in turn to the private value of a. So it's a lot like our bank teller. We can walk into the bank, but we can't go in the vault directly. It's private. But we can go to the publicly available teller, who can then in turn go into the private vault area. And then the second method is the setter, set_a, and it takes a value as an argument, and all it does is set the value of a equal to that value. So let's try our getters and setters out. I'm just going to simply echo back the value of get a, so that should be 1, and then I'm going to set it to the value 15 and get it again, just to make sure that it's working. Let's save that, and we'll go back to Firefox, and we'll just load up access modifiers 2. So there we are, 1 and 15 are what we returned. So those are getter and setter methods, and that's how they work. Now you may be wondering, why go to all this trouble? Why write all this extra code when we could just simply declare a as being public, and then we could work it with like a normal variable, and we could set values and get values directly to the variable? Well, the reason why is like our bank teller example, because the bank teller serves a very useful purpose. They check and make sure we are who we say we are, and they check and make sure that our account has the right amount of money in it before we make a withdrawal. They may also initiate some other actions before they finish with our transaction. So for example, the bank teller might make a note about how many withdrawals have occurred for the day. In the case of our application, it's the exact same thing. We can perform other actions before we return that value. So let's say that we had an action here that was something like log user's IP address. And we'd have to write that function, but this could take place before we let anyone get that value out of there. Or we could check and make sure that they were logged in as an admin user, perhaps, before we give that value. Maybe only admins are able to get that value back. Now, there's some PHP developers who prefer to make most of their attributes private and protected, and then control access to them through methods like these. I'm not one of them. I use setters and getters, but I do it when necessary. When I need to intervene in the process, either to take care of some other business before we return the value or set the value, or when I need to do some kind of an access control or something like that before getting to the value. Otherwise, I go ahead and just make it a public attribute. And that's how we'll be doing it throughout this tutorial. But I'll leave it up to you to decide which one you're most comfortable with. Now that we've seen the 3 access modifiers, I want to take a look at a different kind of modifier in the next movie.